Welcome to Lines and Spaces.
I'm Jason.
I'm Michaela.
And I'm Claire.
So this week we're joined by a very special guest today. We have Claire Coco. Claire, would you mind just talking a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my name is Claire. I'm a senior music education major with a concentration in cello. Um, that's all there is to know about me. Just kidding. I'm from Nyack, New York. Yeah, I love music.
Yeah.
I love music education.
Mhm. Yeah, and Claire is a friend of both Michaela and I, and she is a great music educator, has a lot of experience working with students and also strings, because I am not a string player, but she is, which is a really great insight to what we're discussing today, which is going to be primarily focused on the process of college application, not the process itself, but primarily in the musical sense, we're thinking about how you're selecting schools, how you prepare for auditions, what materials to have prepared, and just like when you're looking at a school, what you're looking at, and choosing, especially in the music, um, in the higher level music learning area, or looking at also though we are all music education majors, the insights for auditions for most schools, between performance auditions and music ed auditions and whatnot, are relatively similar. Some schools do have the differing amount of materials to prepare, but we're gonna be diving into some of that process just because it is kind of audition season as people are getting their pre-screenings done, selecting schools, and a lot of high school seniors are deciding on where they're going or preparing to decide on where they're going. So, let's start with the large question of, I guess, Michaela and I have talked about it. Michaela and I have talked about this a little bit about like why we chose music education. And Claire, I would love to hear like why music education.
Yeah, sure. I guess music has played such an important role in my life when I was growing up. And I just can't see myself doing anything else. And it played, it, when I say it played such an important role, like, it brought me to all of my friends. It taught me all of these non-musical skills that just like made me a better person and just like more functional, organizational skills, perseverance, all these things that are non-musical related. So I want to be able to provide that to students. Music too, but also like the whole non-music aspect. I think it's so important. So, yeah.
And that, yeah, no, I feel like that really harkens back to a lot of the things that we said earlier about that as well. Like I definitely chose. Well, I didn't. I came into this. I came kind of came into this major after the fact because I was something else before this. But yeah, I mainly chose just because it was such like an impactful thing both on my life and just seeing how music programs were developing and the research going in and all the stuff going on. I was really interested to see like how you can assist students in their development and growth through music and how to interact with them. Because the goal, I always found that the goal for music education was never to produce amazing performers and whatnot. It was just kind of like music was the facility to get other things inside your life. So that was definitely my why I decided to choose or stick with music education.
Yeah, my reasoning was pretty similar to that. Pretty much realizing that music is a wonderful vehicle to help people to grow and to connect with the people around them, which it did for me all through my life. And so just getting to bring that to people and get to bring people together through it is such a gift that we have as music educators.
Mm. Yeah, and like yeah, and like we said with everything, music is something a lot more than just playing music. And there's sometimes that is large majority of what we do. Music education is like has a different separate goal because you're also educating rather than just performing. And I kind of just wanted to look at that a little bit since with when you're deciding on choosing colleges or what institution to go to continue studying music at that higher level, what did I guess you guys kind of look at school wise to like decide on where you wanted to go, whether that was location or like where they were, who was in the school, anything?
I could start us on this topic because mine's a pretty short story. I did not intend to go to school for music education at first, and the only school I applied to for music education was Temple on a whim. Uh, and way after the audition dates and deadlines were over, and the dean was so kind to me and said that I could come audition as a transfer. Um, and I just kind of fell into a very fortunate circumstance of it being a very good program. And looking back, if I had known, I would have looked for things like what type of field work do you do, um, just how well rounded the entire program is, and how much experience it allows you to have, because that's definitely really, really important in addition to the type of base knowledge you need to have going into it. Uh, yeah, like I came into music education with very limited knowledge of music as a subject. Um, and it's not impossible, but it is challenging. So if you're coming into it in a similar situation, or to put them together, a situal, definitely be prepared for a lot of work. But looking for things like retention rate, field experience, and just talking to people in the programs has always been pretty helpful.
Yeah. Any
For
thoughts?
me, when I was looking at yeah,
Sorry.
when I was looking at schools, it's all good. Um, Location was definitely one of the biggest factors for me. And funny enough, Temple was on the bottom of my list for a while because I was looking at a lot of SUNY schools that were way upstate, way isolated. And then when I started thinking about how important location is, then I was like, that I can't go to those schools. It's just not for me. And also, um, when you're so far out away from people, then you don't experience as much of a variety of people and variety of experiences. So Temple was like, perfect. It's in the city, it's connected to everything. Um, so yeah, that was how Temple moved from the bottom to the top of my list
Yeah.
once I realized.
Mhm. Yeah, Michaela, wow, I can't say your name this morning. Michaela brings up a great point about location, and Claire had echoed the same, very similar ideas where location falls in because depending on what the location is, it kind of your resources are kind of all centered around that. And not saying there's no suburban or rural colleges or higher institutions all have their takeaways as well, but I would definitely say the urban areas have a lot more connections and a lot more resources for students to engage in. And that's kind of what also led me to Temple, also because it was also the only school that I applied for music education, because I, like Michaela, was not originally thinking about doing music education as the subject to focus on, but music had always played an important role in my life. So definitely when I was looking at schools and why I chose Temple was because of location and the vast amount of resources within the area. And then the next part that I kind of looked at was kind of like faculty. You want to see that the faculty at that school has experience doing the work and doing all the research. And of course, with urban schools and urban settings, you tend to have faculty that is in the local area, especially performances. Like if you're like in Philadelphia, Philadelphia Orchestra Temple has a lot of those teachers, and especially and also other cities, of course, also have teachers that play in the major orchestras or other musical ensembles in the area to look at for teachers. But for music education, a lot of times what I looked at for teachers was reading through their work and reading their bios and seeing where they're coming from, what schools they went to, and like that gives you a good judgment of, oh, that teacher has taught in the public school or private school or charter school area for this X amount of time and has done all this research in that. Therefore, they're probably really well versed in giving me information that I need. So there was definitely for me was definitely location first, seeing as where the resources were, and then kind of looking at the faculty and who was teaching what classes. I would love to also talk about like just a little bit about the process of like the audition process that many of us have gone through, like what we had to prepare, especially with in both sense of performance, music, like performance and also music ed or any like overarching musical audition stuff.
Yeah. Um, so I auditioned. So my first major also required me to audition, and Temple was one of the schools that I was auditioning for that major, and so I threw in the music ed. So glad that I did. Um, but I was used to doing like a lot of performance pre-screens and things of that nature, and I was not used to the more classical side, which was being asked for the vocal auditions for music education at Temple. So I basically learned two classical pieces of music, and those were the ones that I used. And yeah, it was an interesting process because I was used to you'd kind of have like a panel, and maybe it was just because I auditioned later, but um, it was a pretty inviting environment overall when I auditioned at Temple for music ed. Um, yeah, I like went in, I sang, like I gave the accompanist my music, um, sang both of the pieces they asked, and then they had me sight read, or rather, they handed me a sheet of music, and I looked at it and said, "Oh, I don't know," and I sang a few notes that definitely weren't right. They said, "Okay, thank you," um, and I think they probably asked me a couple of questions of why music ed, and then I just waited to hear back from them. So from the vocal side, it was I think pretty standard. A little bit of sight reading, singing two different types of pieces, and then placement tests and stuff after you get there.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting because Temple was definitely my scariest audition. They had the string players get up on Rock Hall, the stage. They had a giant camera in our face, and like I think I had two, my teacher, my current teacher now, and another teacher sitting like halfway, in the audience, and I don't think they even said anything to me, and it was just very like play your Bach, play your etude, play whatever, and like get out of my face. Not really, but it was definitely more distant, and I think that I've found that difference between choir and band or just instrumental kind of everywhere. I feel like this is kind of off topic, but just reminded me. Uh, choirs, everyone's very connected to their choir director, and I feel like it's a very like nice environment, and I think that kind of reflected in your audition experience. And then with instrumental or maybe orchestral, it's a little bit more like distant, and maybe Jason, you understand what I'm talking
Yeah,
about, but
I definitely felt like kind of that mid range. I'm actually really thankful because I started taking lessons with my current teacher before I auditioned, so I knew two of the people because I was also in marching band at the time, and Dr. Brunner was on the panel, and I knew two people on the panel, and there was just two other strangers that I did not know about, which I eventually learned and met them. And so it wasn't that stressful of an environment. And like Michaela, my panel was also it was not in Rock Hall. It was not in any performance hall. We were just in a large like practice hall, and they sat on one end, and I sat in a chair, and I didn't have an accompanist. Also, I do think because it was also I don't think for mine or accompanist was required. It was kind of like if you had one, you could use one, but if you didn't, they could provide it if you called so and so. But if you didn't need one, they just um, you really just didn't need to. And also, go harkening back to what Claire said about the difference between choir and band things. I do get that feelings on that, especially if you're doing like higher level like performance auditions. Like if they know you're going in for performance, sometimes they'll like bring in like like a lot of the actual teachers that teach them, and it's a lot of times they're like big orchestral names in the area. Like I've worked a lot of temple auditions, and you'll see like Matt Vaughn, who is the second trombone for the field orchestra, and like Tony Prisk and all those like big name brass players come to sit in on these auditions because they teach there, and it's like it's the most intimidating thing because like you as the player know who they are. You're like, oh my god, I'm about to play in front of these people, and I have to like, what are they gonna think about me? And that I mean that also falls in line with there's also a lot of cases where you have blind auditions, which essentially is you can't see the panel, you play, they can't see you, you play, and you'll walk out. And I do feel like those are actually a little bit better because you aren't seeing anybody, you're just sitting there, you're getting in there, you're playing, and you're getting out.
Yeah, I think I had the equivalent of a blind audition because I was so detached from the world of like this type of music and just of well, I guess everything music education. Like I didn't really have any connections or anything that I didn't know what I was walking into. Like okay, here's a piece of music I was recently told about. And here's another piece of music. And I know you're asking me to read this, but I sure don't know how. And like it was, yeah, I think probably I would have been a little more nervous if I had actually understood what I was like, what was going on.
No, yeah, that's also the biggest thing. Like, the one detriment to looking at faculty is like if you look at the faculty at a school before you audition, usually they choose the teachers that teach the instrument you're playing or the whatever musical thing that you're doing, and then they usually have some of the other faculty from the other like similar family instruments as well that might come in. So I know for mine I had the primary tuba teacher and then low brass people. So we had two trombone players that were low brass oriented. And also you might get some of your conductors that you might work with in the future also in those audition panels as well. And yeah, the biggest thing is just going in there is you just play as you practice. Don't let the nerves get to you. And my biggest thing for any audition prep is always do the research. Always look into like what exactly they want you to have prepared, and definitely write them down. And if you're applying to multiple schools, a lot of my friends have told me that like you want to see like what things are similar so you aren't overworking yourself. And if it's asking for an etude, use the same etudes that you use for multiple schools if they're not asking for a specific one. That just helps with like breaking down like the load of work that you have to work with, and then eventually you'll come up with like a list of stuff. You're like, okay, this is the stuff that I had to prepare for this school, this school, and this school, and just like make binders or like folders and just like have things listed out so that you have all the materials in one place so that you can look at it and practice in different settings. A friend of mine that I met while working at Curtis Summerfest, who did a lot of auditions in the performance area, practice in like different environments. So like turn the thermostat all the way up and practice in like the hottest room wearing like the warmest clothes and just try to get that feeling of like uncomfortability because it's gonna feel hot in that audition room and you're just gonna have to get through it. Like you have to put yourself in the situations that could come up. So even like playing in like freezing cold temperatures because that happens, and then also like playing in like the worst conditions. Like let's say you haven't practiced and you just had to go in there and just play something. Like see how you do with the like just like a dry playthrough and see if you can do it. And also practice your music out of order because what my teacher said, there's a lot of like tuba excerpts that go like that are really low and some that are really high, and sometimes they'll just make you go, here's a low one and now here's a high one. They're not gonna go like, oh, let's play all the low ones first and then play the high ones. They're gonna try to like challenge you in those ways to see how versatile you are. And that's like from speaking as a brass player, like you have to cover all those ranges and sound consistent all the way through those ranges. So just definitely just be prepared. Definitely do your research. Look at all the repertoire that you need to have prepared. See what's similar. Make lists. Make binders so you have all the materials together, and then practice things out of order and practice in different places.
Yeah. On the topic of like audition kind of advice or like ways of thinking about it, um, two things that I've realized about like the actual day of audition stuff are number one, an audition is a very strange situation, but it can be really exciting because you have these people that have to sit there and listen to you. Like so it's like you're having a performance and they have to listen and they have to say thank you at the end. So that's it's kind of a nice way to think about it if you get like really anxious about auditions. And also, I've had a lot of auditions where I have not had like time to warm up. Like I would go far away to like a school to audition and like be in the car for 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours and then like get out of the car and they say, okay, you have 15 minutes, go ahead in. And like I stand there waiting instead of finding a place to warm up. So as a vocalist, if you can't find a practice room, don't be afraid to like warm up in the bathroom. Doesn't matter if anybody else is there. It's we've been there. It's okay. Um, but yeah, like you don't have to be shy about just taking a moment to center yourself and do what you need to do to like just enjoy what you're doing because at the end of the day we should love making music wherever it is and whatever it is. So do whatever you need to do to prepare yourself for that. Um, yeah, and don't be afraid to ask questions because I would be pretty timid going to auditions and like, I'd be like afraid to be like, "Oh, excuse me, can I go warm up somewhere?" I would just kind of really psych myself out and not do that and just pray that I'd be all right. But don't be afraid to take a moment and get yourself ready. But Claire, do you have any tips?
Yeah, I found a lot of comfort in just reminding myself that these professors and these people watching your auditions don't want to see you fail. Like, they're not wishing that you're going to do badly or you're going to mess up. And, even if they do, they're looking to see, are you able to like make progress? They're not looking for someone that they can't mold. So it's just about showing them that you have the potential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think teachability is like one of those biggest things because like I definitely went into my audition. I listened back to my recordings sometimes of the music that I played. I'm like, how did I get accepted? But no, because you're thinking about like a lot of times teachers are looking at like what skills you have and where they can take you to, and that's also dependent on the schools that you're applying to. Because there are some like conservatories are like brutal about because they only have certain amount of spaces that need to be filled, and you have to be at a certain level in order to fill that space and whatnot. So definitely look at like how your schools are oriented. So definitely like public schools are definitely more lenient with having space because the space is like especially well unless you're doing like a grad degree or something, there isn't a limit to space besides the amount of things they have for those programs. But so definitely look at those and that kind of determines how the strictness is. Especially for undergrad, they're not expecting you to be like perfect because with an undergrad you haven't had like a actual like a long-term study of like just music unless you went to like an art-oriented school. But definitely look into the programs and see the locations. Like Michaela said, ask questions. I worked auditions at Temple and I always hate it when nobody asks me questions even though like I'm more than like willing to just like answer anything and give them spaces they need to practice, and definitely like wow my voice just cracked, but like schools will have your times listed out for you hopefully like of when you can arrive, when your practice room time is, and whatnot, and how they're all prepared for you. And don't be afraid to just because they're all looking for you to succeed. Like Claire said, I think most teachers are looking for you to like do really well so they can give you feedback if needed and whatnot. Yeah, so nobody's against you in the audition besides yourself. So,
Yeah, basically just as long as you go and you just present the best version of yourself, which is the one we're always striving to be anyhow. That's pretty much like the most important thing, and to really remember why you're there and why you're doing it.
mhm. And then like coming off of so after like the audition process, depending on how many schools you decide to audition at, I think nowadays because of COVID, they're doing a lot of pre-screening. So a lot of like you send in your recordings, and then hopefully eventually they'll do the live audition, blah blah blah. So definitely just check up on those, look at your school and see what they have in place, especially right now with COVID and everything. You want to make sure that you are sending in the things at the right time and realizing when deadlines are, because I feel like deadlines are relatively strict because especially with like mass flows of students you want to get those in. um
Or be really nice to the dean, and he might be really nice to you too.
yes, or that write a long and sincere email to them. But yeah, and then also something to also look out for is like if you're in the process of choosing schools, try to reach out to those schools and their administrative board or whoever's in charge of administrations to talk to them and see if you can even get like a lesson set up with a possible teacher, because that also gives you like an idea of like who you're working with and to see if like you kind of groove well with them, because nothing is more upsetting than having to spend 4 years with a teacher that you don't really like and then having to learn from them and then realize you didn't enjoy your time working with them. Yeah, so definitely reach out to the schools and figure that out and then get things set up so you can get a feel of that, because there's nothing quite as important than experiencing how you work with individuals and other teachers as well.
Yeah, definitely. Another quick random tip that I learned from from my experience in transferring: always look for the retention rate of schools and their programs. See how many people stick around after the first year. That's a very important thing.
Oh yeah, that is, yeah. Whoever leaves. But also for the for music ed specifically for those auditions, sometimes you'll have interviews. I know that Temple, our school, recently added those in where you come in, you have a time for your audition, and then you have an interview time, so you go in there and you'll talk with one of the faculty on the board, and they'll oh no, Claire is frozen. Hopefully she comes back. But yeah, just keep in mind like what process you have to go through so you can get through those. And she's gone.
Oh, Claire.
Oh, oh no.
She'll come back.
Hopefully, we'll hope so. But
Yes.
yeah, I mean that's the largest thing with auditions. Like I said, like we've been saying, it's just like being prepared, finding what you have to do, looking at things, reaching out to people who've either have auditioned at the school or are work at the admissions office. Did I say admissions office
Admissions office.
for the school, and just reach out to anybody and even see like who graduated from that school and reaching out to like people. And for music ed, I feel like what's also important is like if you know teachers who've graduated from that school, talk to them because they definitely have input about their experiences working at like going through those programs.
Mhm.
And the good thing is like if the more teachers you see graduate from a program, that's probably a good sign that the program's relatively successful because you're seeing actual teachers that have graduated in the field.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I just got a message from Claire saying no.
Oh,
But I'll give her a second.
oh,
Yay!
there's Claire.
I really jinxed this thing. I shouldn't have said
Welcome back,
anything.
Claire.
I'm back.
Yay! Yeah, I should not have said anything. I should not have said
Oh,
that we had no
I
technical
don't
difficulties. It's okay. I know.
Well,
I still don't know what's going
Oh, there
on.
you're back. Okay, cool. So yeah.
yeah.
So all on the
All right.
topic of auditions, what do you think like cause I know that Claire you've done a lot of auditions in multiple places. Like what level of like theory that you have taken like a theory exam at those auditions in like at the day of the audition or like afterwards? Like we're going to talk about like what level of theory that you might want to have under your hands before you go in for these auditions.
Yeah, I actually only ever had to take one theory, or no, two actually, two theory exams. One was at Hartford, the other one was at SUNY Fredonia, I think. Um, and I don't remember any of them being like really difficult.
Hmm.
I would say definitely like theory one, like all of theory one, I think. And, me as a high school senior, I didn't know a lot of theory. So I probably got about like maybe 60 or 70% of it right, something like that. Maybe more like 70, I think. Um, but yeah, it was just basic theory. I think nothing too. They didn't expect you to know like theory two or three or
Yeah,
really
you're right.
complex things. Just like your basic. What chord is this? Well, what is this a major chord?
What's the nada form?
Yeah. Actually, I don't even think it
No,
was.
no, 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 that was a
It's like
joke. I,
silly.
I don't think they were gonna talk about that. I was like,
Yeah.
but no, I definitely agree with that. That at least for mine, at least it came. So once I was accepted, they sent out the theory test to see like what theory you were to be placed into. And I would definitely say it was definitely the theory test that I took. I took the AP theory and theory in high school, so I had some background and I did relatively well on the test. So if you're thinking about doing definitely like if your high school has theory class or like a theory program for music theory, definitely take it because like any little bit of help to get you through these things and make it less stressful is helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, Claire, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the purpose of those tests, yes, to place you, but I think what they expect most students to just go right into the first theory class that they have. So yeah, I wouldn't stress too that I theory tests I didn't stress about. I didn't really study for them. It was just kind of like a what skills do you have kind of thing.
Yeah, and again, it's my dog agrees. I don't know if you can hear her, but it's not impossible if you don't have a lot of theory knowledge. I had virtually none. I knew like some of the basics, but generally, especially for vocalists, for better or for worst, you might have less knowledge of like written notation and stuff. Uh, but that's like what the classes are for. They're there to teach you what you don't already know and to give you a solid foundation. So, yeah, it's as good as what you're willing to put into it.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think for the most part, a lot of these tests are just to see where you're at, and if you do really well, sometimes you can skip a level of theory along the theory track depending on how your school works. And another thing, I think the biggest thing that I didn't realize was piano. As a lot of schools will require you to do a piano, especially for music ed. They'll do a mini piano audition type of thing where you just play through some things and like you'll sit with one of the faculty members and just to see what level you're at. It's not gonna. It most likely will not make or break your audition unless you're a piano major and that's like your instrument of focus. But it's also gonna see like where you fall on that track because with music education, piano skills is something that's like almost like your primary secondary instrument at most times because you use it so often in the classroom. So what are your experiences with piano and having to go into programs that have piano?
So I have always loved the piano, but I only really played by ear. Like I got to take a piano class in high school that was like there were like 15 of us, and so like I learned what the lines and the spaces on the staff were, and I knew which keys were which on the piano, but that was the extent of my knowledge. So I just really loved to play by ear. I really struggled to read any music. Um, so going into basic piano was very helpful, um, but really tough because it requires a lot of practice and um, it's yeah that's pretty much it. It requires so much practice and discipline, and it's a type of discipline that is different from what I was used to in like the way that you have to practice piano. But it taught me a lot about how to mindfully be working at something.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely a struggle. I had no piano background coming into college. So getting thrown into even just piano one, that was a lot for me. And just like Michaela was saying, it was a long time. I mean, it's been a long time since I was, a beginner cellist. So, you know, working efficiently on cello, like that was, it's in the bag, like it's fine. But then having like a new instrument in front of me, I had to like, think back, how am I going to, get through my challenges on this new instrument? Um, but yeah, Michaela said it's time and diligence, and you're just gonna have to sit down and spend the time. There's really no way around it. And I had to learn that the hard way for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I completely agree with that. Even someone who I've like taken piano lessons since I was in second grade up to my freshman year of high school, going to the program, I didn't make it past piano one because I just didn't know some of the things that they were expecting me to understand, and that's okay. Like you're not like they're not expecting you to be amazing at piano, and there are some times where you are good at piano that you can skip ahead on multiple levels. But like if you follow the piano tracks that are set in within whatever program you're in, is usually going to set you up for success if you put in the time and the diligence to practice, find solid time to just sit there and practice like 15 or 20 minutes a day will go a long way rather than like a couple hours a week. It's all about consistency. If you think back to how you practice your primary instrument, about that consistency of getting consistent practice time, if you do the same for any secondary instrument, you'll find success with any of that. So we covered the theory portion because a lot of schools have theory. We've also covered piano because for music education, piano is key to a lot of our success in the field. Was there anything that was kind of unexpected in the audition process that you weren't just like expecting to have when you were doing it?
I don't think unexpected. Um, Maybe I guess I was a little bit, I don't know, maybe going into my audition, I had this idea that like I was gonna go in and there was gonna be millions of people staring at me and like, like waiting for, like what I was saying earlier, just like, people waiting for me to fail, but it really, you 15 minutes and you're done, it's really, when you're thinking about this one day, this 15 minutes one day for like, 3 months beforehand, a lot of things start to build up. You get like really nervous, but yeah, I guess I expected it to be a lot worse than I thought it would be. So
Yeah, I can definitely agree with Claire on that. That you get this anticipation, like, oh, it's gonna be stressful. Everyone's gonna people that are on the board, the panel that are watching you, and the people in the hallway waiting for you to finish up. They can hear me. They're gonna think I suck. But a lot of times you don't realize that they're also there in the same mindset, so they're not even thinking about you. They're just trying to get through their own thing. And also definitely talk around with them. Like, feel if the more comfortable you feel in that space, I think the easier it's gonna be for you to sit down and just play to the best of your ability. So yeah, I think for me, going off of Claire, that was definitely what I that disconnect of like what it actually felt like and what I had thought it was gonna feel like was what was most unexpected.
Yeah, as far as my music education audition went, I had very few expectations because I just was not expecting, um, yeah, like this was not where I had my sights set. And however, I've done a lot of other auditions, and in all of those, I've found that kind of like what Jason was saying, talk to the people around you. Um, for so many reasons, for me, I've found so much comfort in realizing that everybody else there is nervous too. Um, and, why not be the person to reach out to the people around you and try to help them be more comfortable? And when you do that, you will feel more comfortable and at peace yourself. Um, but I don't think there was too much that was unexpected. Like, they didn't throw any curveballs. Everything that they asked of me was established beforehand. Um, and as far as the whole program goes, it was like a whole world that I was not familiar with. Uh, but yeah, like it's if you're looking into music education intentionally now, um, pretty much they're not going to throw anything at you that you wouldn't expect, and it's all in the name of making sure you're a good fit for the program and that they can help you in a way that would be good and effective.
Yeah, I think that's like a great point because I don't think any audition is meant to throw you off. Like they usually don't throw anything at you to throw you off. Also because they're not kind of looking for that. I mean, sometimes maybe they'll do something, but for the most part, auditions like the stuff that you find out beforehand and what people tell you about the audition is relatively how it's gonna go. You just gotta get through it and type of thing. But so I was just curious about like if there was anything, cause I didn't think that there was gonna be anything like, cause they normally just don't throw things the day of at you unless like special circumstances they might. I think sight reading is like one of like the only things, but they usually tell you you have a sight reading. You just don't know what level that sight reading is gonna be. That's the only thing that I can think of that's kind of like unexpected. But yeah, so we talked a lot about the audition process, some tips to get through it, what to look at for schools, and before we close this off, one more like the larger question is like so of course we all went into music education with an expectation of what music education is going into the program, having been music students for the majority of our life leading up to the point. And then now that we're kind of at the last stage of our pre-service education, like how do we feel about like where we thought it was gonna be and where we ended up finishing at?
So I definitely remember my first year in a music ed program, just listening to the seniors and the people who were about to student teach who are in the place that we are now. I was listening to them and I was like, "There's no way. There's no way somebody's gonna help me to get from here to where they are, and there's no way I'm gonna be able to get myself there." Um, but yeah, just everybody, the way that everybody gets through a program, the way that everybody does life is a little bit differently, and um, that's a good thing. Like that's not something to be upset about. I certainly like the three of us all took the same classes for the most part. I would not want to be the lead brass teacher in any situation. That's definitely something Jason would be better about, and I definitely wouldn't want to be the lead string teacher. Though I've learned how to do that, um, but that's but I definitely feel more prepared than I expected myself to feel. Um, yeah, so just kind of trust that if it's where you're supposed to be and you are willing to put the work in and to really just give it your all, then you're going to be exactly where you're supposed to be by the end of it, and you're going to be able to do what you need to be able to do to really serve whoever you're teaching.
Yeah, Michaela, I agree 100%. Even this time last year, every year I think to myself, you know, I can't imagine, doing student teaching or even just being in front of a group of students. And every year I look back and think, you know, I just think about how I didn't expect myself to be at the point I am. And even now, every, few months I look back and I'm like, look at my progress. And it's really just confidence, and feeling, yeah, just feeling confident in your abilities. And it builds over time. You just have to, like you said, just trust the process. It'll come with experience.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I completely agree with both of you about that point of like I when I came into it I was like I'm not gonna get through this. Like I had an expectation of like what music education was like. Oh, you get into the classroom, stand on a podium, and you teach a repertoire. Because my whole idea was like I wanted to be a high school band director or something like that. And I feel like that kind of blindsides you as well because while going through the program, I know also some people that have gone through the program where it's like their end goal was I want to teach this and that's all I want to teach, therefore I'm not gonna do anything else. And that's when you find people that might leave the program because you're thinking of music education as a program itself is not, it does have the specifics, but like it's also getting you to be a more rounded musician so you can teach all levels because our degree requires us to teach all levels of music education from K to 12 and all the different stuff within that. And you have of course you have your concentration of like instrumental or vocal or even strings in some cases, but for the most part like you really want to keep like an open mind. Like I went in there first thinking like I want to be a band director, that's what I want to do. And though I still want to be a band director, I since having just like allowed myself to open up and just like whatever they throw at me to just try to do, I found like, oh, general music's actually pretty fun. Dancing in front of kindergarteners, like who doesn't want to do that? But it's interesting what you see because you hear all this thing about like oh like that's my goal, that's what I want to do, and then you don't give in to like other things. You're kind of limiting yourself about your experience. Whereas like now with the program being how it is and how open that I was, I definitely feel more comfortable in all those settings, which is something that I didn't expect myself to do. And I think the biggest thing that like I felt like that changed was from where I started over where I was like, I want to teach this to where I am now is like, oh, I don't mind teaching anything. Like if as long as like I'm in front of students working with music, I think the program has prepared me well enough to have all the facilities that I need to be able to start a program or like get through a certain amount of time to build that experience to get there and teach students a meaningful lesson.
Yeah, I agree. When I was coming into this program, I thought, it was teaching band, teaching strings, and teaching choir, and those were all like separate ideas in my head. And was better at one, and I can't do another one. But now that I'm a senior, I've come to realize that it's just teaching music. It's just in different forms, and I can do all of them. So,
Yeah, definitely.
And it's like that's also well, you know that we're primarily talking about our experiences at Temple because we all go to Temple, but like even with like other programs, it's like looking at like I said before, like if you're curious about a program or seeing what music education is like, observed like if you're a high schooler, observe your band directors, observe your middle school director, like go back and talk to them though about their experiences and the programs that they went through because they'll definitely have like different ideas and like options for you to look into. Like they can tell you, oh yeah, my school sucked, so don't go there. Or they might have like great things to say about the school that they went to, and like just thinking about like using your teachers that have taught you, and if you enjoyed their teaching, talking to them to find out like where they went, like what schools and what programs they went through, so you can get a better judgment of what you're getting yourself into. Because a lot of the times I think why people leave music ed programs and like pursue something else, music or music non music related, is because they don't know what they're like they have an expectation of what it is, but then once they get into it, they're like, "This is not what I thought it was gonna be," and then they leave. And there's nothing worse than spending 4 years at like doing a program, being like, "I didn't want to do this." And there's nothing wrong with that. Like you're in the stage where you're trying to develop and find where you want to be, and the best you can do is just hear about experiences from others and just gather yourself together, like what I want to do, what my goals are, and see if the programs can outline those goals for you. So yeah. Do you have any closing thoughts about anything? audition related, any topics that we discuss during our time.
I mean, if you're going for music ed, buckle in.
Yep.
But it's all worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, if you have that mindset that you wanna, like we said earlier about like a lot of like I think all of us went into music ed because music was such a large part in our life, and we wanted to facilitate that same space for future students so that they can continue being educated in music and developing skills within life around music. And I think if you go in with that mindset of openness and not just like that strict, like, I want to do this type of attitude, you'll get through the program and you'll come out at the other side knowing a lot more than you thought you were going to get out of it. Well, that's going to conclude our, what episode? We're on episode 6 of Lines and Spaces. I again want to thank Claire for coming on and being with us in our
Claire.
discussion today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And we're gonna try to do more of these collabs, just so we have more thoughts and more ideas coming into the different flows of what music education. Because it is such a large subject that Michaela and I can only cover so much. Me being an instrumentalist and Michaela being a vocalist, and it's great to hear the insights of Claire's experience as a string player and whatnot going through this processes. But if you have any questions, definitely send us an email. I'll attach the link to that in the descriptions of whatever site you're viewing it on. But again, I want to thank everybody for joining us and listening to us talk about the audition process. If you have any questions, like I said, reach out to us. And also, let's before we sign off, let's give 3 tips to any high schooler who's planning on auditioning. So who wants to go first?
I can go first. So I guess my tips are probably going to have the most to do with the day of audition. So one, just take a moment before you go in, remind yourself why you're there, um, and just really enjoy being in the moment of when you're performing. Two, talk to the people around you, because the more you're kind to the people around you at an audition where everybody's nervous, the better you're going to feel and the more at peace you're going to feel, and you're helping other people to do the same. So that's just a really great way to make the world work. And three, um, just do your research, and then just trust that you're going to be in the right place at the right time.
My tip would be do everything Michaela just said, and then just take a deep breath in and a deep breath out, and just trust the process. That's just trust the process. That's it.
And harkening off both what Michaela and Claire said, to definitely trust the process, be prepared going in, and just get yourself as comfortable as you can be. And that kind of harkens back to like, you know, if you're comfortable in the audition, if you know the material you're about to do, especially in music, like, you can't prepare the day before. Like, if you know that you want to go to X, Y, and Z, these schools, prepare all the stuff well in advance so that you have the time to work through everything, work with your private teacher if you have one, or your band director, or your orchestra director, or your choir director through all the music so that you have a better insight of the music itself. And I think for any audition, for any piece of music you play, style is king. Like, you can mess up notes, but like if you play this piece with musicality and with style and with inflection as best as you can, that's gonna get you through the audition. It's not gonna be how like your amazing portfolio in the background of what you're doing. It's gonna be what you have at that moment of what you're playing it, and if you're inflecting that musicality. Because like Michaela said, you're in that moment, you're performing, you want to enjoy the moment that you're in. So yeah, definitely just always keep that in mind. But yeah, that's gonna do us do. What am I saying? That's gonna do it for us this week on Lines and Spaces. And yeah, we're gonna sign off now.